You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm Maureen.
I'm Janice.
And we are back with another episode for you this week. We are bringing you the Colbournes, which includes Augusta, Leo, Samuel, and we're going to also include Charlotte as well as Alexander, because Charlotte is now a Colbourne, and you can't talk Xander without her anymore, I don't think. So we're talking them today, but we wanted to add a little snippet about a script piece that Janice found when she was rereading the script about after our Mrs. Wheatley episode.
Right. And so I wish I'd had this in front of me then, but we'll bring it up to date. So at that scene where Xander and Augusta are getting ready to go to the birthday party for Georgiana, and he will see Charlotte for the first time. Alexander is standing in the doorway waiting for Augusta, and he says to Mrs. Wheatley, "Do I pass muster?" And her response was, "You must be seen at your best tonight, sir. Life affords so few second chances." And he says, "As I am all too aware." Such a touching moment between the two of them.
And very telling of his awareness of self, because you have to imagine that what he's talking about there is, "As I am all too aware," is his first marriage where he didn't get a chance to make things right. And
right.
He's been made very aware of that. And the relationship is just so good. I love it between those two. Why don't we start with Xander here and his relationships with the people around him? Because obviously we talked a lot about him and Mrs. Wheatley. So even though Mrs. Wheatley, we talked last week about how she is a Colbourne, we just dedicated an entire episode to just her and her relationships with the Colbournes. So she'll come up in here, but we're not going to focus on her relationships with them because we did that last week for you guys. But I think that watching Xander as he was in season 2, and, he was surly, he was quiet, he was basically a zombie walking through life, not really living, just existing. And
self-loathing.
Yes, absolutely. And then we see him come alive under Charlotte's tutelage, but then there's a whole nother layer after they get back from Bath, where he is, like we said, he is self-aware there. He becomes more aware of the mistakes that he's made, and he's owning them in his way. He's owning them, and he's trying to be the man that he needs to be. Not just for Charlotte, though, either. It's not just about Charlotte for him anymore, I don't think. He took those girls to Bath. There was a reason he just went with those two, because he recognizes through Charlotte's tutelage and through being around someone who is alive and vibrant, he realized how much of a mistake he was making by living in that self-loathing, and he was being better for his kids.
And as we hear through the conversations later in the show, especially with Augusta, he was evidently sought out by quite a few women.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has changed greatly, and his relationship with the two of them has changed greatly, although he's still on the hunt for a husband for Augusta.
And I think he thinks it's his job to do that. I mean, he's her guardian. So it's the same thing that Mary and I want to call him Chris. Tom. Same thing that Mary and Tom are doing with Georgiana. Like, they just need a husband. This is how it's done.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
You're right, though. Their relationship seemed different when they got back too, because it seemed like he was more open with her. He joked with her a bit more. They were more freely talking with each other, which it was very stilted. It was very cold before. Certainly cold from her perspective towards him. And I think from him towards her, it was just frustration. And I wouldn't say indifference, but he wasn't giving any of himself to anybody.
Up until the end, the end of season 2, which then all of a sudden crashed when he told Miss Haywood that he didn't want her to be the governess anymore, and that it was really her idea, when of course it was not. Anyway, he was really stuck, as we talked about before, between what he felt and what his head said he should be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. I really love that scene where they're sitting down to with the Montroses at Hayrick Park, where she's talking about having to search for a husband, and Xander has sort of this smile, this little uptick to his lips when she's talking about it, and she's kind of ribbing him about it. But then you also see that scene we talked about last week where Augusta's kind of heading up this mission to get Charlotte back with Xander. And yes, that is because Leo and Augusta love Charlotte, but they saw what it did to him, and it mattered significantly more, his state of mind and his happiness, than it did in the beginning of season 2. I don't even think it was thought of in the beginning of season 2, but their relationship had grown so close and so complete, or so well, that his happiness was a genuine concern for Augusta.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And as we talked a little bit about when they had that conversation with Mrs. Wheatley, Leo and Augusta, it was, Leo was every bit as much in on it as Augusta. She was very concerned about her father and having the right situation. So it's great, and how especially Leo, Augusta too, but especially Leo greets Charlotte every time she sees her. It's, and then, one of the scenes we also missed last week was the scene where she was sitting on the stairs after Augusta and Xander left for the ball. And Mrs. Wheatley says, it's well past your bedtime.
Oh, yeah.
And she says, how can I sleep when even now they might be dancing and Miss Haywood might become my mother? And she's like, well, this will give you something to dream about. And let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, basically is what she said.
That was such a good scene.
It was. Yeah. I can't believe we missed it. But anyway.
In our defense, we probably caught it on the first recording of Mrs. Wheatley. Just not how
sure
we had to redo it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the recap. But anyway.
For sure. Yeah. Because we have talked about that scene before, but I think it's important to bring up now. And that's that it just shows Leo, like when we first see her, she's all about the soldier life. And while we still see her wearing the pants in season 3, we still see her kind of dressing up in that tomboyish sort of way. She's not so focused on this fantasy life that she was in the beginning of season 2, because now her fantasy is within grasp. She's got the potential to have this mother. She's got this father who is now giving her attention and affection that she has been craving and longing for. She doesn't have to dream of going away to fight wars to get recognition. She's getting it from her father, and she knows how much she loves Charlotte now, and that door has been open for her. So even her growth in that has been really sweet and really fun to watch. She's still the same Leo, but she's more secure. She's more happy. She's more based in reality with that childlike fantasy.
Right. So, their relationship has really grown. It's so much healthier. It's, and he has embraced the fact that she is his daughter no matter what, and has shown her love that we saw happen at the end of season 2, but even more so that relationship is cemented in season 3. And so it's great to see that. And so as I have to talk about the fact that Xander, even before that scene with Mrs. Wheatley, is first when he hears that they've committed to this party, he's like, but it's such short notice. And then Leo's like, well, Augusta's already accepted. And he's like, you should have asked me first. And Augusta said, I knew you would be keen on attending, since there would be so many prospective suitors for me. How could you possibly pass up an opportunity? And then Xander's like, you're having quite the change of heart that you're willing to go and meet all these suitors. And Augusta says, perhaps I've learned the error of my ways. And of course, Leo says, and Miss Haywood will be there. and then she's like, Augusta's like, she expressed great hope in your attending. Of course, she did not, but that's okay. And maybe with her eyes, she did. She just didn't with her words.
She did.
Yeah. And Xander's then, well, since you've already accepted, it seems I have little choice.
I guess I have to go now.
Yeah, there's no choice here. I have to go. Yeah. Anyway.
And
funny.
that's a fun relationship too. I mean, we talked about this when we did recaps of season 2, how Augusta sort of protected Leo in her way. It was a weird way. It was a little different, but her aim was to protect Leo and to stay close with Leo. But now to see them working together in tandem as friends as much as sisters, and they seem significantly more familial, because it's not just, and we see that again when it's another scene where Leo's on the steps, right? When Augusta's run away with Edward, and she's afraid to tell them because she doesn't want to break Augusta's trust. So watching them work together to double team Xander, when he obviously had to be aware that Augusta had no change of heart, because he knows Augusta, and he spent all this time in Bath knowing her frustrations and her refusals and her lack of acceptance into getting a suitor. So he allows them this silliness because they all know that Xander knows that it's all about Miss Haywood. They all know it.
Right. Yeah. No matter what's said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and it's just their whole little dynamic between the three of them is so much more warm and family-like.
Yes.
And remember when Charlotte said, that they weren't a family. That's what she said to the Parkers. This is a family. They aren't a family. That was in season 2, but obviously she turned it around. And I do think him making the decision to take the girls and go to Bath was probably a very good one, because it got them all out of that environment, and they had to be more dependent on each other. They didn't have all these acres to run around in, that kind of thing.
And I think the key there too is that I don't know that this is really foreknowledge on Xander's part. I think it just happened to work this way. And I think he was running a little scared from Charlotte, obviously, in the end of season 2. But you cannot enter into a wholly new relationship and expect it to be healthy and good when you are so broken still. And so he had to go to Bath with those girls, not just for his healing, but he and those 2 girls needed to heal together. They were all suffering. They were all dying. They were all struggling. And they were all so broken that Charlotte started the mending process. But really what she did is she shined a light on their brokenness so that they could understand this is not functioning. We need to fix this. And so I wouldn't say he had the foreknowledge of that. I think it was just like, I need to get away. But as he got there, he poured into them. And I think those girls poured into him. And that's why that scene that you were talking about, that's why he allows that frivolity in them and that little silliness in them, because they poured into him. They gave him as much life as he gave to them.
Yeah, definitely. And, he didn't even necessarily think when they came back home that he would see Miss Haywood.
Yeah.
This was a pleasant surprise. And obviously Augusta is quite perceptive about what she figured out what happened.
Yes. I think she's an observer of nature.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yes. So of course we haven't met Samuel yet, but we do pretty soon. But it's interesting. So of course the big scene that's significant with Alexander, and especially with Charlotte in episode 2, is really when they're both at the beach and for the concert.
Yes.
And their hands touch because they end up sitting next to each other, and which was a scene that was previewed to us before the season came out.
Yeah.
So I guess actually at this point, by the time that scene happens, we have met Samuel.
Yep. We meet him in the beginning of episode 2, I think.
Right. Yeah. Pretty early on. Because what happens is Leo and the 3 of them come into the tea room, and they're excited to see that she's still there and hasn't left yet, that Charlotte's there and still hasn't left yet. And then they sit down next to on the table near there and overhear the conversation with Georgiana and Charlotte about trying to find an attorney.
Yeah.
And that sets a whole series of things off. And that's when, because of that, we get the opportunity to meet the brother.
Yeah. And I think that much of that episode is Samuel being introduced to everyone.
Right. Right.
And that's a great scene the first time he meets those girls.
Yes.
He doesn't even skip a beat. He goes right into Leo's play. He responds directly to her in the exact way that she's responding to him without even trying. Of course. I mean, obviously we know it's scripted that way, but let's act as if it's not a script. Let's act as if it's real people response. But that's one of my favorite scenes with Samuel, when Leo holds out her sword and she's ribbing him.
Do we know you? Yeah. Do we know you? And it says, and he says, I'm here, not famous, but infamous uncle. And what is infamous? Famous, but better, and
it's the way he turns with his head cocked to the side and the smile on his face, ready to receive them. Obviously he's a part of that family, but he's such a good fit for those girls, where Xander brings the stability. Now he's bringing more joy and more life, but he brings them stability and reliability. And then in comes Samuel to bring in this light, fun side. I mean, we watch him run around the house playing swords with Leo throughout the series.
Yes. And he's the fun uncle.
Yes.
For sure.
What he does to Xander too, when Xander is first seeing him, obviously it's kind of a tense meeting. And I know that some people, when we did our relationship dynamics between Samuel and Xander, some people didn't agree with our assessment of how Xander responded to him, or how even Samuel responded to Xander. But I still maintain that viewpoint that Samuel was obviously surprised. I do think that Xander had some trepidation after meeting his brother after 10 years. Xander is no longer the same person he was when Sam left. Sam is most likely not the same person he was when he left. So they had to re-meet each other. But throughout season 3, at least in the beginning of season 3, when we're seeing Samuel, he is sort of this source of unknown for Xander. And when he pries, it sets Xander off guard. That when they were in his office, that scene, and we've talked about this before, that scene where they're in the office and Samuel makes a comment of, are we still talking about Miss Lamb or Miss, I don't know if he says Miss Lamb or Miss Haywood, but he's indicating we're no longer talking about what we are pretending to talk about, right? We're talking about Charlotte now, right?
Yeah. The reason why he was motivated to help, it was really not Georgiana, it was Charlotte, because she was Georgiana's good friend. Charlotte's good friend, Georgiana was. And so that's the real motivation for why Xander came after him. Yeah. When Xander went and met Samuel, found Samuel in London, I'm sure he did have an idea where he would be.
Yeah, that's why he was there.
Right. But the truth of the matter is they had not seen each other in 10 years. This is a big deal. No matter how much the English don't emote, especially English men would not have shown that as much.
And when Samuel left, it highly, highly impacted Xander's life. It changed the entire course of Xander's life. They have not spoken or seen each other since Samuel left. At least that's the understanding we're given. Maybe there was an occasional letter. We're given to believe that didn't happen, that there was no contact, is what they wanted us to receive from this. That's my understanding. So this is the first time Samuel knows what he's done to Xander. Samuel knows what he gave up and what Xander was forced to take on when he left. He's well aware of that. And I have to believe he was somewhat aware of Leo and Augusta. He didn't seem all that surprised to see them come out of the house. Granted, they were in a carriage ride. Xander could have updated him on those stuff. But marriage announcements were made in that time.
They rode back on horses.
Oh, that's right. They did. They weren't in the carriage. But marriage announcements were made then. There were still ways that you would find out who married who, how things happened.
Right.
And
that's right.
Knowing what we know.
Any news was so important.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm sure that any news that came from Sanditon, Samuel would have been well aware of.
Yes. And you cannot convince me, given what we were given of Samuel in season 3, seeing who his character is and how he was compassionate and caring. Of course, he may not always been that way, but I have to believe that he has always cared about what happened to his brother and his family and that house and that place. I don't think he ever thought he was ready for it or that he was even capable of taking it over. And that's why he left. But I think he always cared. So he would have kept at least loose tabs on them. So this first meetup was filled with intensity and uncertainty on both men's parts. I'm sure that they were both coming in there with assumptions that probably weren't correct about the other one.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, I'm sure he was very curious about how Xander had handled things. I mean, I'm sure he knew about his wife and what had happened in London. I mean, not have known all the details, but he knew that Xander had a rough life, but that doesn't mean they ever were face to face before.
Exactly.
During that 10 years. And I think that, it was the purpose why Xander came is the reason why they got back together. It was not because Xander just went seeking him out to say hello, brother. And but I think they did a good job during the course of the season of, sort of forgiving each other.
Yes, absolutely. And that was so necessary. We got to see Xander forgive himself, but also his brother, and his brother to sort of relate to Xander how sorry he was and how he firmly believed he was doing the right thing. Because I really think that's, and again, we aren't given explicit dialogue or explicit backstory that tells us any of this stuff. This is just my gut feeling based on what they presented us of these characters. I truly think that the reason Samuel left is because he didn't think he would be right for the job. And though Xander was probably not ready, he thought in the long run, Xander would be the better man for this job.
And the truth of the matter is, he made a choice, and he told, and also Xander is definitely the more responsible, the more, he's not a carouser. And you get the feeling that even if he hadn't married young and all this hadn't happened, he still wouldn't have been a carouser. He's just not that sort of lighthearted.
No, he's steady and reliable.
And Charlotte brings out the best in him, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what he wanted, was to be there and to have that, how the story end up in a great relationship.
Yes.
And he was very supportive and understanding. And, obviously he had a lot of standing in the community, even though to begin with, Tom was like, he's always against everything.
And that's really, since it's Tom saying that, we can deduce, right, that Tom is actually saying he doesn't like any of my ideas.
Or at least most of them, yeah. Yes. But he really does care about the community. We see that as time goes on, and as the story evolves. But yeah, I think it was so awesome for them to be together and reconnect. And for, obviously, he being Samuel was very perceptive about people. And we've talked about that before, but we see how he understood what was going on with Xander, I think, better than Xander understood.
Absolutely.
At least for a long time. Yeah. And his relationship with the girls was awesome. He was supportive, and when Xander was having a fit and saying you can't see him and all this, I love that scene where Samuel starts to walk in the room and then turns around and exits because he's not going to get in the middle of that fight. But he also has observed things she's doing and thinks that Xander is overreacting.
And he tells Xander that at one point.
Right.
Not in but not in a I know better than you, you should listen to me sort of way. It was a very gentle, very almost not even a reproach of, if you continue to hold too tight.
And he was the one who, as he said at one point, when Augusta was just heartbroken after what happens with Edward, he says to him, he's like, Xander's saying, what do I do about, how can I handle this? And he's like, I've was sooner the cause of that kind of heartache than the solution. So I'm sorry, I cannot help you with this.
Yeah.
Obviously we're not using the exact words, but that was the meaning of it. And so it's, his relationship with the girls and his caring. I think that the situation was made better by him being there,
Mhm.
even with Augusta, because Augusta had another sounding board. She could
Yep.
talk to him about what was going on with her father, and have somebody to share her pain, as it were,
Mhm.
with the situation. So, and it was good, so good for Xander to have Samuel there when he ran into, well, not only the situation with the trial and getting some help for Georgiana because of Charlotte, but also had to be there to support him when things happened with Augusta,
Yeah.
when things got difficult, when he was back and forth sort of about Charlotte, and
Mhm.
until he came, until things finally concluded, because of course I think he was pretty constant in his desire, but
Yeah.
what was possible was the challenge.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So,
And I do think that Sam, I mean, if we're looking at it realistically, Xander went to Samuel because he was in love with Charlotte and he wanted to do this for Charlotte, and it was the right thing to do. But
right.
Samuel came because it was Xander who asked him to come.
And he'd never ask him for anything.
That's why he came, because his brother came to him and asked him to come. And Samuel's response was, yes, I will come for you, brother. I will help you, brother. And even that scene where they're at the London house when Samuel is confessing, I've never taken on a case like this. When I said I don't take on cases, I don't win, is because they're easily won cases. This is not an easily won case. So there's that indication that, again, I didn't think I could win this, even though I choose winning cases. But
right.
Samuel asked, or Xander asked me.
Right. That he didn't, it wasn't the kind of guarantee.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that he couldn't win, but he didn't really know what he was getting himself into entirely.
Yeah.
And it was so great to see him sort of let down his guard, especially around Charlotte.
Yeah.
About his confidence, and then to pull the rabbit out of the hat, as it were, in the trial, and get the truth revealed about the motivation of the other side and the lies they were telling and leading, and to set the record straight about Sydney too.
Yes.
Which was awesome.
And I think that's something that he and Augusta, I think that's why Augusta did use him as a sounding board at some points. I think that's why he did have such a good relationship with Leo and with Augusta, because he and Augusta, they're both observers of people. They both care enough to watch other people, not just to see what they're doing or make out why, but when they care about someone, they care about why they're doing what they're doing, and they care about watching for what can potentially hurt them. And I think that's what Samuel is doing with not just Augusta and Leo, but also with Xander. He was watching for what would hurt him and what was motivating him, and because he genuinely cared for these people.
Right. And I'm sure, especially in this day and age, that it would have been puzzling to have his brother, a landowner or aristocrat, trying to provide a defense for this Black woman, who was an heir, but that was the whole reason for the trial, was about whether she was the legitimate heir or not. And so I'm sure he was looking to really understand, because obviously it's not like Xander and Georgiana were best friends or anything.
Or that she had any real concrete connection to not only Hayward Park, but to Sanditon itself.
Right. And that's also, I think, why Samuel had to really convince her that she needed his help.
Yeah.
That and what it was going to be like, so that she was at least somewhat prepared for what was going to come at her on this trial. Bringing in Charlotte's relationship with the family, with the Colbournes, as you said, she ultimately becomes a Colbourne. I think that time in London really gave him a lot of insight into who she was. And he came back quite impressed with the woman that Charlotte is.
Yes. And he saw how she fit in. He saw what she did for that family. He saw how and why Xander would be moved by her.
Right.
Because where Xander is reliable and steady, and he does have more life now. Charlotte is light. She is still reliable and steady, but Charlotte is lightness to where Xander's a little heavy. And I think that his first care was his brother.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think, honestly, him deciding or being willing to come with so little encouragement on Xander's part, that went a long way to Xander trusting him and not welcoming necessarily, but letting him back in to his inner sanctum, to why he's doing what he's doing, to sharing little pieces of himself as it relates to Charlotte here and there.
Why he came to trust him, because, obviously there was a broken trust when he left. When Samuel left and left everything in the responsibility of Xander.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think when they finally come together, I think that it wasn't just Mrs. Wheatley. It was those girls. It was Mrs. Wheatley. It was Samuel. They were all they almost like waiting with bated breath for what was going to come out of Xander running to meet her on the hilltop. And
not to mention Lady Susan.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's true.
And her contribution, who we don't know this because that obviously would have happened after the story, but she became a part of that family as well.
Yeah. Yeah. When she decided to go against the king and return to Samuel, she was a Colbourne.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, she was part of that family at least.
Yes. And that scene at the wedding where they're panning over everyone, the excitement again, I understand it's scripted, but it's scripted this way for a reason. The excitement on every one of their faces as they watch Xander and Charlotte. It was like they were repairing something that had been broken for so long, and everyone could finally see what it looked like for Xander to be whole, what it looked like for Charlotte to be whole, because it wasn't just Charlotte helping Xander come to healing, it was Xander doing that for her. I mean, she started off season 3 with season 2 with I will never be married. I will never put myself in the middle of a man like that again.
Right.
And it ends with her coming to terms and getting healed from that fear of I can't go through this again.
And the final scene when she's closing the doors of the school. One thing I was right about.
Yep.
And they were walking down the street with the Xander and Charlotte and the baby and Leo and what?
Leo and Augusta come up.
Right. Yeah. So the whole family and the little girl that they were teaching to, I can't think of her name. No, that wasn't it. But it's a name like that. It was started with a D. Anyway, Dorca, maybe. Regardless. That's the daughter of the woman who they went and helped in the lower part of Sanditon. They're walking up the street together, and just that feeling of this is right.
Yes. And you see Leo walking down the street again in pants, which is she's free to be exactly who she is. And you see Augusta smiling after the heartbreak that Edward had left her, and you have to imagine that she is got a different outlook. She's comfortable walking along with them as part of the family, as opposed to Xander trying to get her married off. She's comfortable with them. She's comfortable in what her role is with them. And it's just a very well-rounded picture of what their family life is going to be like. I mean, I obviously believe that at some point Augusta does get married and eventually Leo will get married, but I think for the time being, they are finally feeling the freedom to be exactly as they are without being broken or in pain or struggling to put on something else. They're all just comfortable and free to be exactly as they are, who they are by the end.
Yeah. Yep. We don't know. I mean, they might have become a professional woman at some point, one or either of them. We're just at the beginning of the time when you start to see that happening.
That's true.
Very rarely, but it does start happening. So at least writers, obviously, like Jane Austen, that is starting to happen. So,
and I could see Augusta doing that, honestly.
I could too. She was very astute
Yeah.
and articulate and intelligent. And yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if they made her character that way because that is how Jane Austen was.
Wouldn't surprise me that she was supposed to be a reflection of Jane Austen.
Especially
And-
since Jane Austen had that one engagement that she the next day was like, nope, can't do it. And
Yeah.
so it's not the same as a near elopement, but
it's the what happened between them, what happened to Augusta is so much right out of Jane Austen.
yeah, absolutely. Yes. So I know that there are scenes we did not talk about where the Colbournes were in, but the point of this episode was to talk about the Colbournes' relationships with each other. So that's why we didn't bring those up. And the next episode you're going to get from us is going to be a breakdown of Edward and Augusta. So Janice, do you have anything else to say about the Colbournes in relationship to each other?
Well, I have to say this.
Yes.
Obviously, and I knew it was going to happen, but Xander won me over.
Yes, he did.
He is the right person for Charlotte, especially in the long term. No matter how much I love Sydney, but yeah, it was great. But he finally earned his way there.
Yes,
by season 3.
I think that's a good point to make too, because while Sydney is obviously my first choice because we fell in love with him, but Xander is more rooted to where Charlotte wants to be. Charlotte wants to travel, yes, but she loves her people in Sanditon, and it's become this worldly home for her.
Right.
And so it just fit.
And she's matured.
Yes, exactly. She wants slightly different things now. All right. So next episode, again, you are getting 2 a week. And I know that last week's came out a little late, but that was because things happen. But you're going to get 2 a week for the rest of October. And then we will go into once a week schedule. And probably for the month of at least mid-December through mid-January, we're probably going to take a break for the holidays. And I mean, life gets chaotic when you have kids, and Christmas season is here. So we're going to take a Christmas break there. Hopefully we'll be able to come back with some interviews and some other topics for you. So watch out for the next episode that will be coming out today, and we'll see you real soon. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.